So what are information types made of? Well, information types are first and foremost named categories of information. So every information type has to have a name. It has to have something that you call that information type. So for example, you might create an information type called a movie. And each item is a particular movie. The information type called movie has a structure to it that each of the movie items must obey. So first and foremost, it has a name. The name in this case is movie. The next thing that an information type has is elements. Now, I use the term element. I chose the term element among many different ones. I could have chosen field, attribute, quality, aspect. All of those are descriptive terms. I chose the word element for one thing because it maps well to XML, and we're going to be using XML elements usually to model or construct the information type elements. And so we'll just say that the parts, the constituent parts of an information type are elements. And each element itself has certain qualities. For example, you might have an element called title, and the title of the movie is a required element. So that's one of the aspects of elements of an information type, is that they can have optionality, or they could be optional or required, mandatory or required. Another aspect of an element is how many are allowed. For example, there should be one and only one title for a movie in general. But actors, on the other hand, we can have as many actors as we want. If our movie information type has an actor element, then the cardinality, it's called, the minimum and maximums of the actor element should be set accordingly. And we can say a movie can have as many actors as you want it to have in it, but it has to have at least one. Or we could say it has to have between 5 and 100 actors, whatever we want. We can specify the number and the requiredness of any element. In addition, every element has its parts as well. Elements have values. So information types have elements, for example, title and actors, and elements have values. The value of the title element is a text string. It's just one long set of numbers and letters, and that constitutes the value of the title. The value of the actor element would be a name of a person. So those elements themselves have values, and the values in turn have certain constraints or have certain rules that you can apply to them to say what's okay and what's not okay as a value. One of the rules is data type. You can choose to give the value a certain data type. For example, you might give the title a string data type. If you had a date element on your movie, you would give it a date data type, and that says what's allowed to be in that value. Obviously, a date data type would allow you to have, June 22nd, 1999, but it wouldn't allow you to have Fred Jones in it. Whereas a string attribute would allow you to have Fred Jones, and would also actually allow you to have a date, because a date is nothing more than a string of characters and punctuation. So the string data type is very permissive, but the date data type is a lot more restrictive. It'll only allow you to have things that are valid dates. And as we get further into the material, you'll see what exactly those constraints are like. You can have length constraints. So you might say, for example, that your title has to have a maximum of 50 characters because you know that it's going to be displayed in tight spots. You can also have allowed values inside of those. You can have a list of allowed values applied to an element. So for example, the actor element, you may have somewhere off in the distance a list of all the actors for whom you have biographies. And the value that you want to be in the actor element has to be one of those names, because you want to also display biographical information. And if somebody types in a name that doesn't have any biographical information, then you're not going to have anything to display. So the elements can have allowed values. The elements can have constraints on the form of the value. For example, if it's a date, it has to be month, day, year, or actually year, month, day. They can have length constraints. They can also have pattern constraints. So for example, you might have a time and you want that time to be hour, colon, minute, minute. You can put those kinds of constraints on it. You can put, if it's a number, you can put constraints like has to be between 1 and 23 or has to be less than 23. All those kind of constraints are constraints that you put on values. So what is an information type made of? An information type is made of elements. Each element has a value. The element has constraints on it, mins, max, cardinality, optionality, and the values have constraints on them as well. the constraints of what can go in that value, what constitutes a valid value. So information type has elements, elements have values, and values have rules that specify what's a valid value. And that's what an information type is. Now we're going to use XML to implement our information types, but everything that I've just said goes equally well for any other way that you might want to represent information types as well. If you can do the things that I said, you'll be able to construct a valid information type. And of course, XML can do all of the things that I said.